The worst day of her life did not begin at the funeral. It began years earlier, with something she felt, but chose not to name. The morning Gloria Watkins buried her mother, she stood still in front of her bedroom mirror. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that does not comfort you, but presses against your chest, like it is waiting for you to admit something. In her hands, a pair of pearl earrings, small, cream-colored, old, the kind of jewelry that does not announce itself, that simply carries weight. Her mother's voice came back to her, clear as the day she first heard it. "These are for your hardest days," then softer, almost a whisper, "and your finest ones." Sometimes they are the same day. Gloria placed the earrings on slowly, carefully, not just preparing for a funeral, preparing herself for something she could not yet see. Outside, the sky hung low and gray. The air carried that particular October scent, rain that has not fallen yet, a held breath, the whole world waiting. And if she had been paying closer attention to what she already knew, she would have understood. That day was not just about loss. It was about revelation. Because while Gloria stood inside that church, holding herself together, playing her role, performing the strength her mother had taught her to perform, someone else was inside her mother's house, moving quietly, moving with confidence, touching things that were not theirs to touch, searching for something very specific. And the person who sent them was the same man who had kissed her forehead that morning, who had placed his hand gently on her back during the service, who had called her mother's pastor Sir, her husband. Before we go deeper, tell us in the comments where you are watching from right now. We would love to hear from you, and subscribe, because stories like this one do not just expose betrayal. They expose the quiet moments we ignored, right before everything broke. Now, let's go back. Elmwood Baptist Church was full, not just full, overflowing. People lined the walls and filled the aisles and spilled out through the side doors onto the steps in the October cold. Because Loretta Mae Watkins had been the kind of woman people did not forget. 41 years as a school teacher, not for recognition, not for the salary, not because it was the obvious path, but because she believed that shaping a child's mind was the most permanent thing a human being could do. That the marks you leave on a person who is still becoming themselves last longer than any building you could put your name on. She had bought school supplies out of her own pocket every August for 30 of those 41 years. She had stayed late for children whose parents could not pick them up on time. She had shown up early for the ones who arrived at school having not eaten. She had done all of this quietly, without complaint, without expecting anyone to notice. People noticed anyway. They came from 4 different states to say goodbye. Gloria stood at the front of that sanctuary for 2 hours, receiving grief. That is what it felt like. Not condolences, not sympathy, grief, handed to her in pieces, one handshake at a time. Every person who approached her carrying a memory of Loretta that now belonged to Gloria too, because there was no one else left to give it to. She was 53 years old, a hospital administrator who ran a 400-bed regional medical center with the kind of authority that made people straighten their posture when she entered. She understood how to hold a room in crisis, how to be still when everything around her was not. So she performed her strength, perfectly. For 2 hours, she cried exactly once. In a small bathroom off the church office, 4 minutes, she locked the door, gripped the edge of the sink, and let it come. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to release the pressure that had been building inside her chest since the moment she received the phone call that her mother was gone. 4 minutes. Then she stopped, washed her face with cold water, reapplied her lipstick, the deep plum shade Loretta had always loved on her, and walked back out, because that was who she had been raised to be. And beside her for most of the service stood Derrick, her husband of 14 years, tall, composed, attentive in all the visible ways. He had a voice that filled rooms and a stillness that made people trust him before he had said anything worth trusting. He shook hands, called the deacons, Sir, placed his hand at the small of her back at exactly the right moments, whispered that he loved her at the graveside. 3 of her relatives pulled her aside at different points during the reception. independently, privately, to tell her the same thing. You are blessed to have that man. And Gloria, holding their hands and accepting their words, smiled and said she knew. Belief is not always truth. Sometimes belief is comfort, and comfort, when it is not earned, is a very specific kind of danger. Because the truth was, things had been changing, not suddenly, not dramatically, not in ways that would have convinced anyone watching from outside, but enough. Derrick had started asking questions, specific questions about her accounts, her individual assets, her retirement structure, her plans for the rental property her uncle had left her. At first she answered openly, because that is what partners do. They share, they plan, they build together. But the questions did not feel like building. They felt like assessment. The difference between the two is something you feel before you can name it. One comes with warmth, the other comes with precision. Then there was the spreadsheet, left open on the shared computer one evening. A document she had not created, organized, detailed, every asset she owned individually, separated from everything they held jointly. She remembered standing in front of that screen, her mind working hard to construct an innocent explanation, her body rejecting every single one. She closed the laptop, did not mention it, told herself there was a reasonable explanation and kept moving, the way women often do when the truth is something they are not yet ready to stop living beside. Then his phone password changed without a conversation. Then a receipt for jewelry she never received. Then phone calls taken in the garage with the door pulled shut, which in 14 years of marriage he had never done before. None of it was proof. All of it was signal. And so, 6 months before the funeral, on a quiet Saturday when Derrick was out, Gloria had driven to her mother's house. She had sat at Loretta's kitchen table. They had talked about estate documents, about protection, about planning. She had not said the real reason she needed something moved somewhere safe. She did not have the words for it yet. And Loretta, who had spent 41 years learning to read what children and grown people alike were not saying, had not pushed. She had simply made tea and let her daughter do what she came to do. The lockbox held 4 things: her mother's life insurance beneficiary documents, $280,000 with Gloria named as the sole heir, 40 years of monthly premiums Loretta had paid so that her daughter would never have to start from nothing, the deed to the rental property, her father's pension paperwork, and a sealed envelope. Her mother's handwriting on the front, her name, and 4 words beneath it: open if something happens. She had never opened it. At 2:55 in the afternoon, while Gloria stood near the fellowship hall windows accepting a plate of food she would not eat, her phone rang. She almost did not answer. But something in her chest tightened, the way it does when the body knows before the mind is ready. Gloria, baby. Earl, her mother's neighbor of 37 years, a retired postal worker who had watched Gloria grow up from a child doing cartwheels in that backyard to the woman standing now in a navy dress beside her mother's casket. Earl did not interfere, not in 37 years, which is exactly why, when he called, she knew. I am sorry to call you today of all days, but there is a woman going in and out of your mama's house. She's been in there close to 20 minutes. She had a man with her helping carry something in a bag. It just did not sit right with me. I did not want to mind my business and be wrong about something important. Gloria did not speak immediately, because shock does not always sound like gasping. Sometimes it sounds like silence, like a woman standing very still in a church fellowship hall while the world around her keeps moving and she does not. Then Earl said the word that changed everything. She used a key, Gloria. And something inside her did not just shift, it locked into place. Because a key meant access, and access meant this was not random. Access meant someone had given it to her. Access meant this was intentional. Access meant this had been planned. And in the space of about 8 seconds, everything she had not let herself name came rushing forward at once. The questions, the spreadsheet, the receipts, the garage door pulled shut, the password she had never been given again, and one thought, clear and cold and absolute. He planned this around the funeral. He knew where I would be. He knew how long I would stay. He knew I would not leave early, because he knew me, not as a husband, as a strategist. That was the moment betrayal became something more specific than betrayal. It became calculation. Gloria did not cry, she did not freeze, she executed. 4 phone calls, 11 minutes, each one precise, each one necessary. Because she understood something most people only learn after the crisis is over. In crisis, clarity is power. And while Derrick believed he was already 3 steps ahead of her, Gloria was already dismantling the plan he thought was already in motion. The first call was to her attorney, Patricia Osei. "Someone is in my mother's house using a key my husband had access to. I need you at the house. How fast can you move?" 25 minutes. "Gloria, call the police first." "I am not calling them yet." "Why?" "Because if I call now, he finds out I know. And I need him to believe he is still winning. Can you meet me there? I am already in my car." The second call, her bank. Immediate freeze on all joint account outgoing transfers above $500. Done in 4 minutes. The third call, her nephew Deshaun. "Drive past Mama's house. Tell me if there is a silver truck in the driveway." 30 seconds. "Yes, ma'am. Silver truck. Man in it on his phone. I don't know him. Park where you can see the door, but he cannot see you. Do not approach. Just watch. Call me if they move. I got you, Auntie G." The fourth call was the hardest. Her daughter Simone, 26 years old, still inside the fellowship hall. "Mama, where did you go?" "Baby, listen to me very carefully and keep your face calm while you do. Something is happening with your stepfather. I need you to stay where you are, hold things together, and trust me. Can you do that?" A silence. Then Simone's voice came back quiet and fierce, the voice of a daughter who had watched her mother carry difficult things and had quietly been learning how to carry them too. "Mama, do I need to come to you right now?" "Not yet. 1 more hour. I love you. Go, Mama." "I love you." Gloria pulled out of the church parking lot with her hands steady on the wheel and her mind already running every scenario forward. She arrived at Loretta Street at 3:08 p.m. She did not pull into the driveway. She parked 1 house down, walked to Earl's front porch, knocked. He opened the door before she finished knocking. He had been watching from the window. "She's still inside," Earl said. "Been in there close to an hour." "The man in the truck has not moved." "What did she look like, Earl?" "Young, light skin, professional clothes, slacks, a blouse." "She was not nervous. That was what worried me most. She moved like she had every right to be there, because someone had told her she did." The officers arrived 6 minutes after the call, 2 of them. A younger woman named Officer Dawes, and a 20-year veteran named Sergeant Tull, who carried himself with the particular stillness of someone who had learned not to let a situation decide how he felt about it before he had all the information. They knocked on the front door of Loretta's house. Gloria stood just around the corner of the porch, out of sight, her back flat against her mother's brick exterior. She pressed her palm against the wall. Her mother had chosen that brick, had stood against it 42 years, watching seasons change. The door opened after almost 30 seconds. The woman inside was exactly as Earl had described. Young, professional, composed, a rolling tote bag at her feet. She looked at the uniforms, and her expression moved through 4 emotions in about 2 seconds. She settled very poorly on confusion. "Ma'am, we received a report of an unauthorized entry at this address. Can you tell us your name and your relationship to this property?" She said her name was Candace Webb. She said she was a personal assistant. She said she had been sent by her employer to collect some personal documents. She said it was all authorized. She said a key had been provided. "Authorized by whom, ma'am?" And that was the moment Gloria stepped around the corner, into the full sight of the woman standing in her mother's doorway. There is a particular look that crosses a person's face when they realize all at once, with no warning, that the person they believe they were deceiving is standing 3 feet in front of them, watching, already in possession of every fact they thought was hidden. Candace Webb had that look. "My name is Gloria Watkins," Gloria said. Her voice was even, almost gentle, the way a surgeon is gentle, not from softness, but from precision. "This is my mother's house. My mother was buried 3 hours ago. I did not send you here. I did not authorize anything. A pause that lasted exactly long enough. "And that is my lockbox in your bag." Candace Webb said nothing. Her hands began to shake. The bag was searched. The lockbox was inside, still locked. She had not been able to open it with the method she had been given, and so she had made the decision to take it whole and deal with it later. Also in the bag, a manila envelope of household documents from Loretta's kitchen drawer, and a small velvet pouch. The pouch had sat on Loretta's dresser since 1987. Inside it was her grandfather's gold pocket watch. 2 rings, one her mother's wedding band, one a ruby ring from a man Loretta had loved before Gloria's father, and a small enamel brooch shaped like a magnolia blossom, cream and white, the one Loretta had pinned to her lapel every Easter Sunday for the last 30 years of her life. Gloria looked at that velvet pouch in the hands of a stranger standing in the doorway of her mother's house on the day of her mother's funeral, and she understood something she had not fully had words for before, that there is a form of violation that goes deeper than money, that when someone reaches into the most sacred geography of your life, into the objects that hold the people you loved and the moments that shaped who you are, and picks through them for their exchange value, something is broken that cannot be fully repaired by recovering the objects themselves. This was not theft. This was violation. At 3:47 in the afternoon, Gloria's phone rang. Derrick. She looked at his name on the screen for 3 full seconds. Then she answered, "Hey, baby, how are you holding up?" "I am so sorry that call ran so long. I am heading back right now." His voice was warm, easy, the voice of a man who had no idea the ground had already shifted. She let a small silence land, the kind a tired woman makes after a long and grief-filled afternoon. "I'm okay," she said. "I stepped out a little early. The food and everything got to be a bit much. I'm back at Mama's house." The pause on his end lasted 1 beat longer than it should have. "Oh, at the house?" "Yes," Gloria said. "Come when you can." She ended the call, looked at Patricia, who was watching her, said quietly, without any emotion in the words at all, "He is not coming back." She was right. His phone went to voicemail for the rest of the night. Derrick Watkins was no longer in Memphis. 9 years. That is how long he had been preparing. Not months, not a year. 9 years of small, patient, deliberate movement. $194,000 moved out of their shared financial life in amounts always small enough to avoid scrutiny. Business expenses, client lunches, software subscriptions, conference fees, the ordinary language of a professional life used to conceal the architecture of a slow, patient theft. He was not reckless. He was not impulsive. He was patient, and patience is what made him dangerous. He had a partner in Nashville, a woman named Felicia Drummond, a network of operators who connected disaffected spouses with the infrastructure they needed to execute large-scale asset theft against the people they had married. He had found them at what appeared to be a business networking event. He had been patient there too. The funeral was the deadline. Loretta's life insurance, $280,000, would pay out within 45 days of the death certificate being filed. He had spent 3 months preparing for that window, recruited Candace, arranged the charter, established the offshore account structured to receive the funds, and he had chosen the day of the funeral specifically. Because he knew Gloria. He knew she would stand at the front of that church for every single guest. He knew she would not leave early. He knew she would not allow herself to. Because leaving early would have meant abandoning her duty to her mother. And duty was something Gloria Watkins did not abandon. He had studied her patterns, her rhythms, her values, her love. And instead of protecting her with what he knew, he weaponized it. That was the part she could not stop thinking about at 3 a.m. Not the money, the intimacy, the fact that the instrument of her betrayal was not her weakness. It was her love for her mother, used against her, with precision, by the person who was supposed to protect it. The unspoken chapter. There is a chapter in every story like this one that does not get told enough. It is not the chapter about the arrest, or the verdict, or the financial recovery. It is the chapter that happens in the quiet spaces, in the middle of the night when the case is moving forward and the practical things are being handled and there is nothing left to manage. And you are alone, for the first time, with yourself. 3 weeks after the funeral, Gloria found herself in her mother's kitchen at 2:47 in the morning. She had driven over without fully planning to, just got in the car and let the car take her there. She made tea without thinking, from muscle memory. In her mother's mug, the one with the faded sunflowers on it that should have been replaced 10 years ago and never was, because Loretta could not see the point of replacing something that still did its job. She sat at the kitchen table in the yellow light, and she let herself think the thing she had not yet let herself think out loud. When did I stop being enough? That is what betrayal does. Not immediately, not in the first rush of discovery and crisis and motion, but eventually, when everything quiets, it plants a question. Was I too focused on my career, too driven, too much of one thing and not enough of another? Did I miss something I should have caught? Failed to give him something he needed? Was there a version of me that would have made a difference? She sat with those questions. She looked at them directly. The way she had learned to look at hard things, without flinching, without rushing past. And then, very slowly, sitting in her mother's kitchen with the yellow curtains still, and the old radio on the counter that she did not turn on because the silence felt like something that needed to be honored, she arrived at an answer: no. Not because she had been perfect. She had not been perfect. No person is. But because the question itself was wrong. Because the question assumed that there was something she could have done or been or given that would have made a man capable of this into a man who was not. And that assumption was the lie. The lie that betrayal plants in you. The idea that you are somehow responsible for what someone chose to do to you. A man who loved her would not have studied her for access points. A man who loved her would not have sat beside her in that church holding her hand while his accomplice walked through her mother's side door. A man who loved her would not have used her love for her mother as the mechanism of her own undoing. None of what happened had anything to do with whether Gloria Watkins was enough. She had always been enough, more than enough. She had simply loved someone who was never capable of understanding what that meant. She finished her tea, washed the mug, put it back on the hook, turned off the kitchen light, sat in the dark for a few minutes, listening to her mother's house breathe around her. Then she stood up and drove home, and something that had been wound very tight inside her for a very long time came, just slightly loose. Gloria Watkins did not collapse. She did not post, did not perform her pain publicly, did not hand the story to anyone before she was ready for it to be told. She did what Loretta had raised her to do. She got quiet, she got organized, and she got to work. Candace Webb agreed to cooperate fully. Her testimony gave investigators the thread they needed. That thread led to Terrence Brooke. Brooke led to a man in Nashville named Gareth Cole, who had been running a financial fraud network for the better part of a decade, connecting disaffected spouses to forgers, pilots, and offshore banking structures, taking his percentage, disappearing when the arrests came. He had done this before, not once or twice. 9 families, 5 states, 9 different women who had built something real and had it targeted by the person sleeping beside them. Every single one of those women had stayed quiet, because silence is what happens when shame moves faster than justice. Because a woman who has been robbed by someone she trusted does not always lead with the robbery. She leads with the question, what will people think of me for not seeing it coming? Gloria understood that impulse. She had felt it herself in the first 48 hours. She chose not to be quiet, not because she was fearless, because she was angry in the kind of way that burns clean, and because she understood that silence was the only thing left that Derrick could still take from her. She called each of Cole's previous victims personally, gave them Patricia's number, told them simply that the case was being built with or without them, but that if they wanted to be part of ending it, there was room for them. 7 of the 9 came forward. The night after Derrick's arrest, Gloria sat at her mother's kitchen table with Simone beside her, the sealed envelope in her hands. Open if something happens. She opened it. 4 pages. Loretta's careful school teacher handwriting, precise and clear. The handwriting of a woman who had corrected thousands of essays over 4 decades and believed that every word placed on a page deserved to be placed there with intention. Loretta wrote about the 2 conversations she had never mentioned. 2 times when Derrick had visited the house alone and asked questions about Gloria's finances that did not feel like the questions a partner asks. They felt like the questions a person asks when they are assessing something they are planning to take. She wrote about the key, that she had moved the spare 6 months before she passed, and that she had hoped she was being foolish. She wrote about the pearl earrings, that she had chosen them specifically because they had survived difficult things before and were still beautiful. And then at the bottom of the final page, in letters pressed slightly harder than the rest, as though she had written this part last and needed it to carry weight: Gloria, you were never the problem in that marriage. A man who truly loves you does not study you for weaknesses. He studies you to make you stronger. You have always known more than you allowed yourself to believe. I watched you dismiss your own instincts for years to keep peace with people who did not deserve the peace you were keeping. Stop doing that. Trust the thing you know before you can name it. That knowing is not paranoia. That is wisdom. That is the part of you that has never lied to you. It took me too long to say this. Forgive me, baby. Wear the earrings on your hardest days and your finest ones. I am proud of you every single day. Love, Mama. Gloria read it 3 times. Then she folded it precisely along its original creases, placed it back in the envelope, and held it flat against her chest for a long time. Simone reached over without a word and placed her hand on her mother's arm and left it there. Sometimes the women who love us see things clearly long before we are ready to look. Derrick Watkins, 9 years, federal prison. Gareth Cole, 17 years, RICO conviction, 9 victims, 5 states. Candace Webb, 18 months, full cooperation, restitution, fund. Felicia Drummond, 6 years. The bank records made her defense impossible. The $280,000 went exactly where Loretta had always intended. To Gloria, directly, intact, exactly as it had been designed. Gloria kept her mother's house. She kept the yellow curtains, the old radio on the counter, the hooks by the back door. She planted the same black-eyed Susans along the eastern fence every spring, and she added one thing to the kitchen wall: a small frame, ivory mat, simple wood, her mother's handwriting inside it, 4 lines from the letter. Stop doing that. Trust the thing you know before you can name it. That knowing is not paranoia. That is the part of you that has never lied to you. She sat beneath those words in the mornings, in the yellow light, with her mother's mug, rebuilding, not just financially, the quieter kind, reconstructing trust in her own perception, permission to name what she sees without negotiating herself out of it, the understanding that her instincts had always been earning her loyalty. She was just finally ready to give it to them. 8 months after the funeral, she stood at a podium in Nashville at a statewide women's financial wellness conference. She was one of 4 keynote speakers. She was the only one who told a true story. The room went quiet the way rooms go quiet when something true is being said and everyone in it recognizes it. Afterwards, 11 women found her, one at a time, privately. Most of them did not say much. One simply took both of her hands, stood there, nodded once, and walked away. That was enough. Gloria understood completely. She gave every one of them Patricia's card. Here's the truth I want you to leave with. The most dangerous betrayals do not come from strangers. They come from people who had access to your home, your accounts, your patterns, your calendar, your love. Pay attention to the questions shaped a little wrong. The interest that is a little too specific. The patience that has a purpose you have not been told about. Trust the thing you know before you can name it. That knowing is not paranoia. That is wisdom. That is the part of you that has never lied to you. And remember Earl Pemberton, the 71-year-old retired postal worker who called from a porch because something did not sit right with him. Be that for the people around you, and let the people who love you be that for you. Gloria Watkins is still in Memphis. She still runs the hospital. She still sits at her mother's kitchen table in the mornings. She still wears the pearl earrings. If this story moved you, drop a comment and tell me what part stayed with you. I read every single one. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. That is how stories like this one do their real work. I will see you in the next one.